I would like to call upon Ms.Smita Tharoor, who will be addressing all of us on reading between the lines, defining the progressive way of learning.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here. I've been in conversation with Chahat for a while, and I'm so glad that I've made it happen and I'm actually here. And wonderfully, I'm talking about unconscious bias. Yes, I am. But before I even met any of you, I heard Rahul speak, and then I heard, Sandeep speak, and both of you said something similar to what I'm about to say. So the good news is we're all repeating ourselves. Because if you remember when Rahul was showing you all his slides and the amazing work that the university is doing and is going to achieve by the end of 2024, which is going to be in a blink of an eye, he talked about the fact that students need to learn rather than come here and say, all right, I'm a student, and now, when I finish, I'm going to be earning 25 lakhs, 30 lakhs, whatever it is. It's not going to work. They first have to understand what's going on within them and how are they going to understand what makes them good learners, what makes them effective learners. And then, of course, Sandeep came up, shortly after. And what did he say to all of us? He talked about learning, and he used, again, I'm totally paraphrasing, so forgive me, gentlemen, but he talked about the idea of learning and how we have to understand that learning is not about rote. Learning is about emotional resilience. Learning is about building relationships. Learning is about communication. And when we can understand that about ourselves, then we will be more effective learners. So guess what? That's what I'm going to be talking to you about. So it's a good connection. So I've called it reading between the lines, defining the progressive way of learning. So we're talking about defining the progressive way of learning. So first and foremost, we have to talk about what is an effective learner. Now that opening sentence is an obvious. It's somebody who wants to learn. But the second sentence is the one that I want you to focus on, and focus on the two words that I've highlighted, which are non-cognitive skills. So what do you then understand by non-cognitive skills? It is not sitting in a classroom when somebody is teaching you something and you are understanding it with the ABCD of that particular subject. It's something a little bit more ephemeral. What does that mean to you, and how does that feel? What kind of skills do you think you need to have, which you and I could call non-cognitive skills? So these are some words, and I really want you to think about this. I'm aware that we're running late, so I'm not going to spend too long on each of these words. You know the meanings of these words, but I want you to think about this in the idea of learning. And I'm addressing this talk actually more to the students who are here as much as to the faculty, because I think it's very, very important. I've been speaking to a few students today, MBA students, and certainly in India, most MBA students finish their undergrad and then get into MBA. They have, in my opinion, no real life skills of working, of understanding, of exploring, of having failures, of having successes at work. It hasn't happened yet. So then how do you learn? And you're still learning and you're doing your MBA. What does that then mean to you? These are all extremely obvious words, I hope, to all of you, when you think about what it means in terms of non-cognitive skills. But guess what? You know what you're going to say, and I'm again telling the students rather than the academics. You're going to say, self-confidence, that's the last one. But you're going to say, it's hard. It's really difficult. Do you know we're students? We've got to hang out with our friends. We're just making relationships. And that's also true. So how do you then focus and learn these skills that are essential, not just to complete your university degree, but for the rest of your life? And in my opinion, the very, very first point that all of us, not just the students, but every one of us in this room today needs to start thinking about is our unconscious bias. And then only will the others follow. Staying motivated, overworking, dealing with housemates, all of that is a given. But then what is unconscious bias? Simply put, let's just look at these two words. The word bias is a preference for or against. The word unconscious means I don't know. So you don't know that you have a preference for or against X, Y, or Z. It could be a way of behaving, it could be an individual, and so on. And in the context of this, I just want to share a story with you. So I also teach at the University of Arts London. And University of Arts London, they teach the students there study various aspects of art subjects like ceramics, pottery, so on and so forth. And what I did is I went into their classroom. This is pre-COVID days, and I put them. I think there were about 30 people, 30 students, and I put them into groups of 5 or 6. And on each table, I gave them an object. And for those of you from India, many of you are not from India, but those of you from India, I'll describe the objects to you because most of them were Indian. One was a little Kerala wooden box with an elephant on the lid. Another was a lovely shawl that I picked up from Shantiniketan, and so on. Each of these things had meaning to me, but they didn't know that. I put one on each item on each table, and I asked them to look at it, feel it, touch it, play with it, and then think about a couple of words, just a couple of words that they felt, their emotions. What do I feel when I am looking at X? Okay? So there were lots and lots of different answers, and I don't have the time to share with you. But the story I want to share with you was one student. She was studying ceramics. And she looked at the box with the elephant head on it, which actually is my sewing box at home, but I'd emptied it. So it was completely empty. And she looked at it and she said, I feel sad when I look at this box. And I said, why do you feel sad? And she said, it's empty. It's not perfect. There's nothing in it. The box has not been used. So I said, so what? So she then said to me, in my home, growing up in my home, and she would have been, I'm guessing her age, 22, 23 years old. She said, growing up in my home, we couldn't make mistakes. Everything had to be perfect. No mistakes allowed. And you had to be doing everything correctly. And if I made a mistake, my parents would not be very pleased. And then she gave me an example of when she accidentally broke an egg. And her mother was very angry because she dropped the egg and it broke. And she said, I look at this box and I remember all these stories because I understand that I cannot make mistakes and I have to be perfect. And then I said to her, but you're doing ceramics. How on earth are you going to achieve anything and achieve and succeed if you don't challenge that specific unconscious bias within you that you have to be perfect? Because if you think about, people who are my age, don't even look at the 25-year-olds. Let me look at the people in the front 2 rows here who are closer in age to me than a 25-year-old. And ask yourselves, what kind of stories did you have as children that you thought was normal, that you didn't question? You said, obviously that's what I do. Obviously that's how it's going to be. And then when you get to be an adult and you're now in your 20s and you're at university, how do you challenge those thoughts? So this young lady had realized that she needs to challenge her unconscious bias about being, in inverted commas, perfect. And only then is she going to be able to learn. Really have what you and I call effective learning. So that's just a very small example that I'm giving you about the idea of how we all have different aspects to us. It's our narrative. It's who we are. But moving swiftly on. Okay, this guy is an old guy. He's been around forever. But I'm bringing him up again. Did I lose a slide? No. Okay. He's been around since 1995. And he's written a book, very simply, called Emotional Intelligence. We've now got many, many other brilliant writers, and I'm going to talk about in a minute. And your friend, Steven Pinker. But why am I bringing this guy up? Because click again. He talks about us needing to be resilient. And he talked about this in this book. And he talks about us human beings being self-aware, managing ourselves, motivating ourselves, showing empathy, and then building relationships. These are the things that will help us in terms of more effective learning. Now, alongside that, if you could just show the next slide. This particular group based in Chicago is talking about learning. And they are saying that if you really want to be effective learners, then you need to follow the 5 interrelated social and emotional learning competencies. And they're 5. And guess what? Do you see what I'm saying? So here's one guy talking about emotional resilience, And here is another group based in Chicago talking about effective learning, and they're exactly the same, with slight differences in choice of words. They're not my words. So, what then do we need to do to be effective learners? So what I have done, very, very simply, is just show you very briefly how we can think about improving our learning under these 5 headlines. Now, if you look at this slide, and you look about being self-aware, this is a much larger conversation I should be having. I'm kind of chasing through just for you to start thinking a little bit about what self-awareness actually means to you. If you're thinking, I'm going to be a better learner, I'm going to be a good student, I know how I can interact with my faculty, well, it isn't going to be happening if you can't first begin to think about who you are as a human being and how self-aware are you. It starts with you first. Accept what you're feeling. The third point that I want to point here, just in the interest of time, is keeping an emotional journal. Now, this is extremely important. And I'll tell you why. Because our emotions come in the way to stop us from learning. Now, there's a woman at Columbia, I don't know if she's still there, but there was a woman at Columbia University who was teaching medical students. Her name is Rita Sharon, Charon. And what she did is she was telling the medical students, at some point, the medical students needed to be with patients. But they were getting emotional and they were not understanding and they were not putting their learning into effective practice. So she said, create an emotional journal. The key here is emotional journal. Actually put in words into your journal that make sense to you for your emotions. How are you feeling? What are you doing? Why are you angry? And by actually writing it down, psychologists tell us that you are having some release from your own emotions. So that's the key point that I want to point out from here. I mean, this is such a long time ago. Do you see what I'm saying? This is old news. We should all know it. We should all practice it. But what we tend to do is we're chasing our tail. We're trying to earn the big bucks. We're trying to get the good grades. And we're not thinking about ourselves as real people. So this one, in terms of self-management, I think the main point, is about, I'm going to pick up on this, each of us will take something else, is about anchoring your positive feelings. And anchoring your positive feelings, I believe it is a true story and not apocryphal. But when Obama was president, and those of you who are Indian will know Hanuman, but those of you who don't, quick summary, there is an Indian god called Hanuman, who is a monkey god. And I'm being extremely simple in my explanation, but the monkey god had the power of becoming as small or as little as he needed to save people, to save Sita and so on. Okay, so I just need for you to remember that Hanuman had the power of becoming big or small. So the story goes, and I believe it's true, that somebody gave Obama a little Hanuman statue, which he would put in his pocket. Now, he's not a practicing Hindu. It is not about that. But he was the president of the United States. And when he was making decisions and when he was listening to people, he put his hand discreetly in his pocket to anchor his feelings, to remind him that he does not need to be only big, he can also be small, to remind him that it's okay to listen differently. I don't believe that it's a made-up story, because somebody I knew who worked in the Obama government also shared this with me. So who knows? But I like the story anyway. Okay, so that's the main point I want you to take away from here. Here's another quote. We're catching up with ourselves. Now that's 12th century. You remember that time when you've got an exam tomorrow and you're thinking, I can't do this anymore. Oh my God, it's too stressful. How am I going to manage? Wake up at 3 in the morning. Remember those days? Just tell yourself, it'll be okay. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. Motivation, the one I want you to focus on, the main one, is make the goal compelling. Because you know what? Even if it's something that you hate doing and you have to do, you've got to find something that makes it work for you. This is very important between academics and students. And I'm speaking to both of you when I'm showing you this one. Because now we've done the intrapersonal. We've talked about self-awareness, self-management, self-motivation. We're beginning to challenge our unconscious biases, beginning to think of ourselves. But now we're interacting, you and I. I'm the teacher, you are the student. How are we interacting? How do we aim? The point I want to focus on for here is actually keep your emotional perspective and really help clarify your thoughts when you're communicating with others. Because what you want is a win-win, obviously. So instead of getting angry, instead of allowing your emotions to come in the way, think calmly, logically, and see if you can communicate get the best out of the people that you're communicating with. Now, last slide here, aim for a win-win. Sometimes, or agree to disagree if you like. But the point is, you can't always win, and you mustn't always lose. That's not a good place to be. It's about wanting to agree something, even if you disagree on the fundamentals. I've deliberately taken somebody who's been around forever, Stephen Covey, and I've added my own bits to it to connect the dots, because everybody's heard of him, but it's not 7, okay, it's 8, please note. And I just wanted you to read these. Be proactive and do not feel sorry for yourself. How many times have we felt sorry for ourselves? It's good, isn't it? It's nice to wallow a little bit in our own misery and feel so sad. Oh God, it's been so difficult. I'm having such a bad time. Do it for about 2 minutes and then move on. Because otherwise you'll end up getting stuck in it. Begin with the end in mind. In other words, take control. You are the only person. It sounds kind of simplistic, but you are the master of your own destiny. What do you want to do? How are you going to manage yourself? Somebody's doing something to me, I can't manage it. Easy to say. But it's your decision, not theirs. Embrace change. Well, guess what? If nobody's embraced change since COVID has started, I doubt if you're going to embrace change. We've all learned how to do that. Aim for a win-win. Seek first to understand. Do not live in the past. That's connected to the first point. Don't feel sorry of yourself. 3 years ago, I was doing so well. Now look at me. Doesn't work. Synergize. Learn from your mistakes. This one, 7. 7 is an important one, and I'll tell you why. If you are feeling vulnerable and not feeling successful, and then your friend calls you and says, guess what? I've got this fantastic job, and I'm getting X amount of money, and I'm doing really well. Can you bring it within yourself to really feel happy for your friend? If you can, then you're emotionally resilient. It's hard to do. Very hard to do. And of course, the last point is about me, myself, and I. Focus on yourself. Listen to your thoughts. Write an emotional journal. Think about these things. This guy, the other Daniel, he's written many books, most recently called Noise, and the one before that, he's a Nobel Prize winning, he's a psychologist, but they had to give it to him for economy. And he's written a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. You probably know it. It's been around for ages. And more recently, Noise. And what is noise, simply put? The noise in our brains. That's the noise we're talking about. How do we jump to conclusions because of X, Y, or Z? What's going on in our head? That kind of noise. This lady, I'm going to play a short 3-minute video to conclude. She's a Nigerian-American novelist. She's also a feminist. And if you don't know her, I suggest you find her and read some more about her. Her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And she is going to be talking, she's a clip from a TED Talk. You can hear the whole TED Talk on YouTube. And she's just going to be talking to us about the danger of a single story. And the reason why I put this in to close my talk is for all of us to understand that we are not a single story. We are, what did Walt Whitman say? I am large, I contain multitudes. We are many, many things. We're not one thing. We're not an MBA student only, or a techie only, or a dean only. We are many things. How is it that we can manage those many things within us and still be successful? I don't know if we have time for any questions, do we? Do you know, Rao?
So you were showing that video of Chimamanda. She's a very famous novelist. So in her thing, she talked about, she came to US as an African. So do you think stereotypes come, because what she was talking about is stereotypes. You're stereotyping people. Like Japanese love sushi, Indians are curry, that kind of thing. So does it come from a cognitive bias, or is it how do you explain?
I'm going to answer your question slightly differently, because the purpose of my talk today, as you know, was to tell you about how you want to be effective learners. So let's think about us and what is our bias and our stories and what gets stamped upon us rather than nationalities. So, for example, and I'm telling you, I'm not lying. When I was little, I'm the youngest of three, and I was considered the clumsy one. Well, guess what? I'm still considered the clumsy one. Hello. I mean, what's going on here? And I've just come from Delhi. I was with my siblings in Delhi and my mother. We are old people now, okay? My siblings are grandparents themselves. But between the three of us, we go back into dynamics of when we were 5 and 10. And I become the clumsy one. And I started talking to them about this right now. And how what we tend to do is we stamp people. We put a stereotype. Forget about Indians being curry. Are you the clumsy one? Oh, maybe if you have a sibling, you're the clever one. Or you're the responsible one. What about the other guy? Do you see what I'm saying? So let's start with us and our families and our stories, and then think of the danger of the single story. That was the purpose of this for today's conversation. We're good. Great. Thank you all.